What's up, horror? This is your boy Horror Gamer back with another Horror Gamer Reads for you, and we are in it, guys. We already started it. We're gonna dive right back into it. Resident Evil Volume 3, City of the Dead. Let's get it. That's right, guys. The last time we were in this book, Barry and Jill were getting stuff ready to head on. They're getting ready to biz out, and this is right after the occurrences in the first book, Umbrella Conspiracy, and kind of like a recap of the Caliban Cove book. So Jill was packing stuff up in the dark, trying to get ready to go to wherever she needs to be, and now we're going to dive into Chapter 2 of City of the Dead. So without further ado, let's just dive right into it and see what we got here. Chapter 2, October 3rd, 1998. Twilight had settled across the mountains, painting the jagged horizon in shades of purple dusk. The winding blacktop snaked through the gathering darkness, surrounded by shadowed hills that towered into the cloudless sky, stretching toward the first faint glimmerings of starlight. Leon might have appreciated the majestic view a bit more if he wasn't so goddamn late. He'd make it to his shift on time, sure, but he'd been hoping to get settled into the new apartment first, take a shower, get something to eat. As it was, he might have time to hit a drive-thru on his way to the station. Changing into his uniform back at the last rest stop had saved him a couple of minutes, but basically he was screwed. Way to go, Officer Kennedy. First day on the job, and you'll be picking cheeseburger out of your teeth during roll call. Very professional. His shift started at 9, and it was already just after 8. Leon let his boot ride a little heavier on the gas, even as his Jeep whipped past a sign that told him he was half an hour away from Raccoon City. At least the road was clear, except for a couple of semis. He hadn't seen anyone for what felt like hours. A nice change considering the traffic tie-up just outside of New York that had cost him most of the afternoon. He'd actually tried to call the night before to leave a message with the desk sergeant that he might be late, but there had been something wrong with the connection. Nothing but busy signal. Oh boy. What little furniture he had was already moved into the studio apartment in the working class, but basically decent Trask district of Raccoon City. There was a nice park not 2 blocks away, and it was only a 5-minute drive to the station. No more gridlock, no more overcrowded slums or random acts of brutality. Assuming he could survive the embarrassment of showing up to his first shift as a full-blown officer of the law without having unpacked his bags. He was looking forward to living in the peaceful community. Raccoon is about as far removed from the Big Apple as you can get. Thank you very much. Well, except the last few months, those murders. In spite of himself, he felt a tiny thrill at the thought. What had happened in Raccoon was horrible, of course, sickening. But the perps had never been caught, and the investigation was really just getting started. And if Irons liked him as much as the heads of the academy had liked him, maybe Leon would get a chance to work on the case. Word had it that Chief Irons was kind of a prick, but Leon knew his training had been top-notch. Even a prick would have to be a little impressed. He'd graduated in the top 10th, after all, and it wasn't like he was a stranger to Raccoon City, since he'd spent most of his summers there as a kid when his grandparents were still alive. Back then, the RPD building had been a library, and Umbrella was still several years away from turning the town into an actual city. But in most ways, it was still the same quiet place he remembered from his childhood. Once the cannibal killers were finally put away, Raccoon would be ideal again. Beautiful, clean, a white-collar community nestled in the mountains like a secret paradise. So I get settled in, and a week or two passes, and Irons notices how well written my reports are, or sees how good I am on the target range. He asked me to take a look at the case files just to familiarize myself with the details so I can do some footwork. And I see something that no one else has seen, a pattern maybe, or a motive on more than one of the victims. Maybe I run across a witness report that reads wrong. No one else has caught it because they've lived with it for too long, and this rookie cop just comes along and cracks the case. Not a month out of the academy, and something ran in front of the Jeep. Jesus! Leon hit the brake and swerved, shocked out of his daydream as he struggled for control of the vehicle. The brakes locked, and there was a screech of rubber that sounded like a scream. The Jeep half turned to face the darkening trees that lined the road and came to a stop on the shoulder, dying after a final lurching jolt. Heart pounding and stomach in knots, Leon opened the window and craned his neck, scanning the shadows for the animal that had darted across the highway. He hadn't hit it, but it had been close, some kind of a dog. He didn't get a clear look, a big one anyway, a shepherd or maybe an oversized Doberman. But it had looked wrong somehow. He'd only seen it for a split second, a flash of glowing red eyes and lean, wolfish body. And there was something else. It had seemed like kind of slimy. No. Trick of the light. Or you were just so shit scared that you saw it wrong. You're okay, and you didn't hit it. That's the important thing. Jesus, he said again, softer this time, feeling both relieved and suddenly quite angry as the adrenaline leaked out of his system. People who let their dogs run loose were idiots, claiming they wanted their pets to be free and then acting surprised when Fido got squashed by a car. The Jeep had come to a stop just a few feet away from a road sign that read Umbrella City 10. He could just make out the lettering in the growing shadows. Leon glanced at his watch. He still had almost half an hour to get to the station. Plenty of time. But for some reason, he simply sat for a moment, closing his eyes and breathing deeply. Cool pine-scented air breezed across his face. The deserted stretch of road seeming almost unnaturally quiet, as if the landscape was holding its breath, waiting. Now that his heart had resumed a more normal pace, he was surprised to find that he still felt unsettled and even anxious. The murders in Raccoon weren't a few of those people killed by animal attack, wild dogs or something. Maybe that wasn't someone's pet at all. A disturbing thought, and even more disturbing was the sudden feeling that he had that. And even more disturbing was the sudden feeling he had that the dog was still close by, maybe watching him from the darkness in the trees. Welcome to Raccoon City, Officer Kennedy. Watch out for things that may be watching you. Don't be an asshole, Leon mumbled to himself, and felt a little better at the sound of his nonsense, adult tone of a voice. He often wondered if he would ever outgrow his imagination, daydreaming like a kid about catching bad guys, than inventing killer dog monsters lurking in the woods. Let's try to act our age, eh, Leon? You're a cop, for God's sake. A grown-up. He started the engine and backed onto the road, ignoring the strange sense of unease that had somehow managed to take hold of him in spite of his mind's childish, chiding voice. He had a new job, a nice apartment in a nice little up-and-coming city. He was competent, bright, and decent looking. As long as he kept his creativity glands in check, everything would be fine. And I'm on my way, he said to himself, forcing a grin that felt out of place but suddenly necessary to his peace of mind. He was on his way to Raccoon City, to a promising new life. And there was nothing to be uneasy about. Nothing at all. If he only knew. Claire was exhausted. Oh, we got Claire now too. Claire was exhausted both physically and emotionally, and the fact that her butt had been aching for the last couple of hours wasn't helping matters much. The thrum of the Harley's engine seemed to have settled deep into her bones, a physical counterpart to the butterflies in her stomach. And, of course, the worst of it seemed to emanate from her extremely sore and overwhelmed ass. Plus, it was getting dark, and like an idiot, she wasn't wearing her leathers. Chris would be totally pissed. He's going to yell his head off, and I won't even care. God, Chris, please be there to scream at me for being such an idiot. The Harley buzzed along the dark road, the sound of the engine echoing back and forth, back at her from the slumping hills and shadow-laden trees. She took the corners carefully, very aware of how deserted the winding highways was. If she took a spill, it would be a long time before anyone happened by. Like it would matter. Take a spill without your gear on. They'll be scraping pieces of you off the asphalt with a squeegee. It was stupid. She knew it was stupid to have left in such a god-awful hurry that she couldn't be bothered to suit up. But something had happened to Chris. Hell, something may have happened to the entire city. Over the past couple weeks, the growing suspicion that her brother was in trouble had become a certainty, and the calls she'd made that morning had clinched it for her. Nobody home anywhere. Like Raccoon moved and forgot to leave a forwarding address. It was definitely creepy, although she could give a shit about Raccoon. What mattered was that Chris was there, and if something bad had happened to him, she wouldn't think that way. Chris was all she had left. Their father had been killed on his construction job when they were both still kids, and when their mother had died in a car crash 3 years ago, Chris had done his best to take on a parental role. Even though he was only a few years older, he'd helped her pick a college, find a decent therapist. He even sent her a little money each month beyond what the insurance policies paid out, what he called walking around cash. And on top of all that, he called her every couple of weeks like clockwork. Except he hadn't called at all in the last month and a half, and hadn't returned any of her calls. She tried to convince herself that she was silly to worry. Maybe he'd finally met a girl, or something had turned up on the stars suspension thing. Whatever that was all about. But after 3 unanswered letters and days of waiting for the phone to ring, she'd finally put in a call to the RPD that very afternoon, hoping against hope that someone there might know what was going on. She'd gotten a busy signal. Sitting in her dorm room listening to that soulless mechanical beat, she'd started to worry for real. Even a small city like Raccoon had a voicemail answering system set up to field calls. The rational part of her mind told her not to panic, that a downed line was nothing to get freaky about, but already her emotional self was screaming foul. She'd gone through her address book with trembling hands, dialing a few numbers she had for friends of his, people or places he told her to call if there was ever an emergency and he wasn't at home. Barry Burton, Emmy's Diner, some cop she never met named David Ford. She even tried Billy Rabbitson's number, although Chris had told her that he disappeared a few months earlier. And with the expectation of an overloaded answering machine at David Ford's house, she had gotten nothing but busy signals. By the time she'd hung up, the worry had transformed into something close to panic. The trip to Raccoon City was only about 6.5 hours from the university. Claire's roommate had borrowed her riding gear to go out with her new biker boyfriend, but Claire had an extra helmet, and with that feeling that was not quite panic spinning through her frightened thoughts, she had simply grabbed the helmet and gone. Stupid? Maybe. Impulsive? Definitely. And if Chris is okay, we can laugh about how ridiculously paranoid I am till the cows come home. But until I find out what's going on, I want to know a moment's peace. I won't know a moment's peace. The last of the day's light was draining from the strip of cloudless sky above, although a waxing nearly full moon and the soft tail's headlight gave her enough light to see by, more than enough to see the small sign ahead of her left, Raccoon City 10, telling herself that Chris was fine, that if anything weird had happened in Raccoons, somebody would have checked it out by now. Claire forced her concentration back on handling the heavy bike. It would be full dark soon, but she'd be in Raccoon before it was too dark to ride safely. Whether or not Raccoon would be safe, she'd find out soon enough. Holy shit. So, we're there, guys. We now have officially met Leon and Claire, and I'm just, as I'm reading this, I'm seeing the beginning of the Resident Evil 2 game, and I'm just like so over the moon by this. But I'm really hoping you guys are enjoying this read through as much as I'm enjoying doing it for you. Like I say in every read through, I do apologize. You know, your boy Horror Gamer isn't the strongest reader, but it's something I enjoy doing, and I really hope you guys are enjoying it. So with all that being said, guys, if you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button along with that dingly ding ding button. Now every time your boy Horror Gamer throws up one of these Horror Gamer reads, you're in the know. Also, when you're done doing that, head on over to the official Horror Gamer Patreon and see what kind of cool stuff we got going on there for you guys. We do movie nights every Saturday, we do chill nights, we do birthday things, we do all kinds of stuff. Definitely check that out. And then after that, head on over to the Z Network and see what kind of cool stuff we got going on out there. A bunch of us creators got together and just created something special for everybody. And then when all that's said and done, head on over to wherever you get your podcasts, whether it be Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is, and check out your homeboy Horror Gamer and his homegirl Gabby and H0rr0rr in their new podcast, Horror Haven LLC, where every week we tackle a new subject. We just put up a video last night or yesterday about horror comedies. Last week we had found footage movies, so we tackle all kinds of subjects. So definitely tune in and check those out. And I will leave the link to in the description for all of that, so you know your boy Horror Gamer takes out all the guesswork for you. So, but all right, guys. With all that being said, I love you guys. Thank you guys. Until next time, this is your boy Horror Gamer saying, as always, Don't fear the darkness. Embrace it.